Now this is what I'm talking about. Despite its inspired concept, I came away from the original Megami Tensei game, Digital Devil Story, wishing it had more to offer beyond a basic dungeon crawling grind and flimsy story, both of which wore out their welcome halfway through. Well, as if the Archangel Michael himself answered my prayers, revamped successor Shin Megami Tensei finally delivers on the design framework Megaten 1 laid down, only this time complete with fleshed out world building and characters, beautifully detailed worlds to explore, handy convenience features, and meaningful player decision making. I know, choices that matter in a JRPG? Color me shocked as well, and SMT pulls them off brilliantly. What's more, based on everything I'd heard about the early entries in the series, I wasn't expecting to like this one nearly as much as more recent and better regarded classics like Persona 3. However, Shin Megami Tensei has quickly become one of my very favorite JRPGs. Allow me to explain, with plenty of spoilers. Shin Megami Tensei's premise involves a player-insert protagonist caught up in an increasingly epic battle between order and chaos, played out on a local scale at first via two warring cults before escalating to a grand conflict between gods using humans, particularly your character, as pawns. Actions you take throughout the game put you on either the law, chaos, or neutral alignment, which affects gameplay in myriad ways, such as the bosses you face, dungeon availability, even the demons you can summon into battle. It's a surprisingly deep system for 1992, and though this may be an earlier Super Famicom title, I'll note that I played a fan translation. SMT is full of surprises and that quintessential Atlus flavor. Right off the bat, Shin Megami Tensei sets the sci-fi mood. Tokyo, 1990X. We open on our protagonist. I'll call him Kazuya, since that's what the strategy guide for the PS1 remake goes with. He's having a prophetic dream filled with a horrifying depiction of a man strung up on a cross, another man being attacked by a demon, and ending with the classic imagery of a naked lady in a lake. Yeah, they don't make them like this anymore. She speaks to young Kazuya right before he wakes up, promising him they'll be together forever. That's a little ominous. These intro scenes set up the three major factions of the game, which will come into play soon enough. In the meantime, Kazuya awakens to a message on his computer from some hacker dude named Steven, who has mass sent a demon summoning program out to anyone with the gonads to try it. Naturally, Kazuya downloads it, then wanders outside where he realizes his hometown of Tokyo ain't quite how he remembers. There's a lot of police activity and rumors of demon appearances and attacks. It's not long before he finds out these rumors are true, but in an inexplicable stroke of what can't be luck in an SMT game, Steven, the hacker, makes contact just in time to show Kazuya how to persuade demons to join his side. That's right, you can capture and summon demons from your computer to fight your battles, though before Kazuya gets to do much of that, he's wrongfully accused of a crime and tossed in jail, where he serendipitously meets future party members, the Law Hero and Chaos Hero. Turns out these are the guys from Kazuya's dream, and they both had similar dreams too, so everybody already recognizes each other. Surely this means they must work with each other, so they decide to band together as a party to find out more information. Now, you can rename these guys, but I'm gonna keep calling them the Law and Chaos Heroes, since they tie heavily into the plot and the player's decision making. You'll see. As in the previous entries, the action inside dungeons plays out from a first-person perspective, a hallmark of the early Atlus games and a holdover from the days when most RPGs were first-person dungeon crawlers. I enjoy this style. It still gives Shin Megami Tensei a unique feel to this day, though it does mean relying on maps to get through each new maze. Though the in-game mapper spell works fine, certainly more usable than Digital Devil Stories, and helps keep exploration interesting, I always end up eventually resorting to online maps to help me breeze through these older games. SMT was no different. Besides, like any good dungeon crawler, its mechanics are fun enough that I don't feel I'm missing much this way. I've drawn my own maps playing this style of game plenty of times before, and I don't need that fully immersive experience every time. If you've never played a first-person dungeon crawler and are interested in checking out SMT though, I would recommend trying to not use online maps for your first time through. It's a unique experience you won't get from any other genre. Plus, town navigation on the overworld does carry over the top-down perspective used by Megami Tensei 2, a hybrid I've always been fond of. Something else I'm fond of is reaching more RPG fans with this channel, and if you'd like to help me out, consider leaving a like on this video or even subscribing to RPG Haven for more retrospectives like this one. It's free, and I'd appreciate it. Anyway, demon summoning in SMT works close to the same as in Digital Devil Story. By the way, did you know that was Atlus's very first game? I've got a retrospective on it too, if you're curious. Thankfully, unlike in the first Megami Tensei, you can now recruit demons even if there's more than one left in a stack, fixing one of my big complaints about that first outing. Nice. At the start of a turn, Kazuya can choose to talk to a monster, initiating a text-based minigame of sorts, where the demon will do stuff like ask for cash, ask a yes or no question to judge your character, or even straight up flee. Often it takes multiple correct responses to these various pseudo-random requests to win a demon over to your side, yet you don't usually fail from a single wrong answer. Conversation paths branch or even loop, and while most outcomes eventually do lead to failure, the process manages to feel less punishing overall than in Megami Tensei 1, due to how you can often get out of a bad conversation path and try something else before you piss off a demon to the point they start attacking. Typically, if I wanted any particular digital devil, I could nab it within a few encounters, a huge improvement for my impatient ass. The recruitment system's also a lot more engaging this time around. Much of what the monsters say in these asides makes next to no sense or comes off as childish or disturbing. While you might chalk some of that up to the translation, I'm betting it's also in the spirit of the original Japanese. It makes these abominations sound as otherworldly as they look, as if their human communication skills aren't much above children's since they operate on a completely different spiritual plane. Either way, it's neat. I don't need to speak Japanese to know this is one weird game, full of trippy cutscenes, religious motifs, and sequences where dreams are indistinguishable from reality, not to mention loads of strange and macabre happenings like demon-human hybrids, a cult that summons Lucifer, metaphysical dimension breaks, oh, and apocalyptic nuclear war. If you haven't noticed from all the eschatological visual references, it's almost as if the devs just thought demonic and satanic imagery is cool and decided to go hog wild using it in a game. As expected, this works, in large part since the religious theme is played straight. Shin Megami Tensei isn't satire, it's not trying to mock or take down any one religion. It's simply a JRPG that takes inspiration from Christian, Jewish, and pagan mythologies because they've got badass iconography, instead of sticking to typical genre themes. After playing so many Japanese RPGs that pull heavily from either the classic elements, or Greek, Roman, or Norse myths, or Zoroastrianism and other Eastern traditions, SMT fulfills my desire for novelty, and boy does it go hard in that respect. In fact, presentation is this game's strongest asset. It's gorgeous, easily the best looking title from 1992 I've played so far, with a classic 80s anime vibe to boot. Smooth, flat colors make up visuals that I'd compare to today's cel-shaded 3D games, except these are hand-drawn for the most part. Dungeon backgrounds tend toward the simple side, making the fully detailed characters and demons pop. Seeing each new monster sprite was a treat, especially since I'm familiar with most of their old portrayals in Digital Devil Story, as well as in Persona 3, the only other game in the series I'd played up to this point. Ooh, I've got to have one of those is something I said to myself often in this 35-hour adventure, despite being deceived more often than I'd like by demons whose badass looks outmatch their combat utility. Ah well, the demon designs are so cool that it was worth it. In a rare move for such an early JRPG, there's also relatively few palette swaps. Take that, Dragon Quest, I imagine was a familiar sentiment among those more rebellious Japanese kids in '92 who were looking to play something that breaks the mold. Kazuya begins with the ability to summon only a few demons at once, an interesting restriction that gets lifted later on. I say interesting because at first it doesn't seem necessary, since my favorite resource, Mag, also returns. I hope you can tell I'm being sarcastic. Like in prior games, Mag drains as you walk around while having demons summoned and is replenished by battling, a mechanic that should remove the need for summon limits if it were more well balanced. The problem is that here, Mag feels even more pointless than before. At least in the first game, I occasionally found myself running low and had to limp along with just my human characters for a while. In SMT, I barely paid attention to my mag count and never had a problem. It's not even displayed most of the time, so why include it at all? The summon limit is enough of a balancer. But back to our party, wandering the streets that have turned into a war zone. Kazuya and co. soon learn their city's under invasion by demons from a place called the Abyss, and that American forces have seized control, presumably in an attempt to quarantine all of Tokyo. Those damn Americans doing American things. What a mess, especially since a Japanese militia group headed by Goto, one of the story's major players, has risen up against the US forces. Worse, the leader of a major resistance group has been captured and is up for execution by none other than Yuriko. Remember, the woman Kazuya met in his dream earlier who wants to be with him forever? Apparently, she claims, once the resistance is out of the way, she can fulfill her promise. That's, concerning. In the first major choice of the game, it's up to you to choose a side. Work with the American ambassador Thorman and his rule of law, or side with Goto's military to start some chaos. Of course, there's also the neutral option, which canonically most involves this resistance leader chick who becomes the final party member no matter your alignment. She'd also previously appeared in Kazuya's dreams as a sacrifice, so clearly will play a vital role in the events to come. I'll call her simply the heroine, since I'm sticking with Law Hero and Chaos Hero for the boys. Those gentlemen, by the way, though happy to work as part of one happy party at first, eventually show signs of stirring disagreement, both with each other and with Kazuya, depending on what choices you've made and when. You see, they're no generic NPC party members. As their names imply, they play key roles in the story, even potentially leaving your party, or worse. Yep, more than any Japanese RPG I've played, SMT pulls out the stops to ensure your choices matter in terms of both story and gameplay. I walked the neutral path, figuring I'd see a little of everything that way, and to my surprise I wasn't disappointed. Usually RPGs don't put as much effort into neutral routes versus the more obvious outcomes of good or evil, but here I think it might be the best choice. The game's set up so that you'll explore most of the same areas no matter which path you choose, perhaps with a few minor differences, such as the locations of NPCs or bosses that come earlier or later in one route versus another. All the while, subtle decisions you make tick your alignment toward either law or chaos, even when you might not realize it, a mechanic I appreciate in an era where designers love to spell out every consequence for your choices before you even make them. It's not until deep in the game that you can actively choose to boost one alignment over the other, and only at a single point. An oddly pachinko-esque monster gauntlet that probably doesn't make much sense to anyone not using a guide, but it is there if you need it. Your choice of alignment also affects demon availability. You can capture or fuse whichever ones you want, but only a chaos-oriented Kazuya can use chaos-aligned demons, and same for Law. However, this doesn't impact the game too much. You can get powerful summons no matter what. I might have missed out on the very strongest options by forgoing both Law and Chaos, but overall I was happy with the selection of neutrals on offer, as they certainly weren't lacking for power. Besides, you've got plenty of time to change your mind mid-game to either repent for your sins or embrace Lucifer. And I mean plenty of time. SMT is lengthy, filled with dungeon after dungeon, and while it's supremely well-paced with plenty of short scenes, dialogue, and surprises to break up the flow, it's still a hardcore RPG with old-school sensibilities. You're forced to take your time, learn each new area, where all the shops are at, which monsters to look out for because they can one-shot you, which demons to catch, and so on. I love that kind of thing, but it's not for everyone, so know what you're getting into. At the same time, no one should be afraid of a game like this due to its age. It's from the heyday of the SNES. This ain't some early CRPG or even Megami Tensei 1, a significantly more painful and tedious experience. SMT1 ain't tedious. Like in its predecessors, you can run from battles, but when you don't, they're snappy and fast with a handy auto-battle function some players might poo-poo, but I consider a godsend. I'm all about when games let me configure my setup then execute my will indiscriminately, and for a game all about using computers to control demons, that's a perfect fit. Yo, give me an SMT game with FF12's gambits, pronto. Aside from all the devil summoning, battles themselves play out about as traditionally as JRPGs get, only with Atlus's now famous naming scheme for spells based on their own mix of language inspirations. That's one of my favorite parts of these games. However, this time your human party members are no slouches. Instead of needing to protect Kazuya, for example, most of the time I had him at or near the top of my party, soaking up hits while melee attacking for good damage, comparable to what my demons were putting out for the duration of the game. In fact, he was often my very best damage dealer in boss fights. Score 1 for the hominids. The heroine, your sole other permanent party member, is best suited as a strong magical attacker with occasional gun support for enemies weak to hot lead. Sadly, not many are, and guns go underused despite being the only other main weapon type. You can distribute each character's stats upon initial recruitment as well as at level up, but it's clear each are meant to play specific roles stat-wise, which I stuck to. No need to be a rebel on a first playthrough. The heroine should stick with magic, while the hero focuses on the game's hilariously broad category of quote-unquote swords, in this translation anyway, that includes not only katanas, but also whips, rods, hammers, a chainsaw, and more. You still get 0 XP when you run from battle, even from stacks you've already killed. Ugh, when will that limitation go away? But thankfully now, if you successfully talk a demon out of combat, you will get XP from down stacks. So the verbal approach to demon quashing becomes a viable, if not outright desirable, way to end a battle when a surprise stack of 6 of the worst kind of monster in the dungeon pops up right after having taken down another big stack. Yeah, that disgusting mechanic makes its way back in this entry too. And while it might not take more than a few tries to capture any one demon, it can take a while to actually find the one you're after due to how much time gets spent in dialogue with the beasts. Admittedly though, this is all less of a chore on an emulator. While much of the action takes place in ordinary locales like the Kichijoji district's local mall, hospitals, labs, and office buildings, the happenings are anything but, and that's the true appeal of SMT to me. It feels like nothing else on the market. The story eventually takes the party all over Tokyo, from Ginza to Ikebukuro to Ueno, and even to a send-up of Tokyo Disneyland called Destiny Land. All of these are far from familiar, steeped in a dreamlike haze where seemingly anything can happen, at least anything involving the occult or demons. Of course, from my perspective, a JRPG set in Tokyo is exotic enough on its own, but putting that aside, there's a lot of crazy stuff going on here. Possessed computer terminals, corporate conspiracies involving magic, encounters with Buddhist deities, an old man NPC who somehow knows way more about the forces of law and chaos than you, and most intriguing of all, Yuriko, the enigmatic woman you've already met once who you'll meet again in the depths of various dungeons, and who from the moment you meet her is obviously more than she seems, not least because she claims to be the woman in the lake from Kazuya's dream, and once again pledges to be with him forever. I'm not sure I'd be hyped about that given the circumstances, but Kazuya rolls with it. He's a chill guy. Cleverly, Atlus again chooses to restrict the action to a window with the UI below it, which only takes a few minutes of getting used to and presumably lets the devs do more visually. But it also helps immerse the player in the dystopian nightmare version of Tokyo they've crafted. It's almost as if the smaller window made me focus harder, and I'd find myself zoning out grinding for half an hour or more, not even realizing which controller buttons I'm pressing, absorbed by the depths of a cult's headquarters or a creepy government building. If this is the kind of atmosphere and visual appeal Atlus could accomplish for a relatively early SNES project, I can't wait to see what SMT2 looks like. And I haven't even mentioned the music, a huge step up from the just okay soundtrack of Megami Tensei. Alright, that one does have some killer tracks, but I gotta be discerning for such a rich genre of amazing music. Returning composer Tsukasa Masuko makes the most of the Super Famicom sound hardware to dish out a course of layered, chunky atmospheric tracks, dark and spooky overtures, and intense, pulsating rhythms. Primarily voiced by synths, the OST as a whole goes for haunting and creepy as a central theme, one well suited for a game all about the demonic. Masuko never forgets about melody though, laying down chunky bass lines, thumping drums, watery flute and vocal sections, even the occasional upbeat jazzy tune. But most of what you get here is dark electronica, and it rules, a fact displayed beautifully by the title sequence, one of the more memorable on the SNES. In what feels like the start of a movie, a low synth drones over the iconic magic circle imagery of the occult that's since been incorporated into the franchise logo, as scenes of the horrors to come flash over a classic code crawl with dissonant piano chords and a stark heartbeat. Imagine booting this thing up as a Japanese teen the day before Halloween in '92 after having played a bunch of Super Mario World or Dragon Quest V, which came out just a month earlier, and experiencing such a complete tonal shift. Those were the days. A third of the way through, in a pretty neat timer-based sequence, Tokyo gets destroyed by nukes and civilization as we know it is lost. Yep, no joke. The party ends up in a mysterious place where they meet an equally mysterious man named Eno Ozuno, who explains they're in Kongokai, basically the Abyss, or Afterlife. He offers to send everyone back to Earth, albeit with a warning. It might be different from when they left due to all the destruction that's been wrought. The heroes swear to defeat the demons and bring peace back to the world. Before fulfilling his end of the deal, Eno requests some Soma water from a spring somewhere in Kongokai. Of course, the whole place is a dungeon, so it's a bit of a trek to find. Then, upon your return, just to troll you, he sends you all the way back to fetch another glass rim. What a dick! Now that's some classic Japanese humor I can appreciate. The party eventually does get zapped back to a ruined post-apocalyptic Tokyo, where they hear about Ozawa, a new villain who's been on a tear of psychologically breaking the population's minds. He does this by enslaving individuals who exhibit psychic abilities, then forcing them to twist the minds of others. It's pretty messed up, and this guy now runs all of Shinjuku. What's worse, rumors are that the Roppongi district has turned into a zombie-filled wasteland. Furthermore, Tokyo as a whole is about to get flooded. These are but a few of the new challenges awaiting our reluctant heroes, who've got no choice but to either embrace or balance the forces of law and chaos to try to save the world. That's the premise for the latter half of the story, which centers on a massive dungeon called the Great Cathedral, which Kazuya and his traveling companions will visit several times, progressing either high into its towers or deep into its depths, depending on their chosen alignment. It's only around this point when your decisions start playing out in major ways involving the law and chaos heroes, each associated with one of these wings of the dungeon. Based on what choices you make and when, one or both of these heroes will leave your party to become a major antagonist. Their personal stories get touched on throughout the game, as they periodically leave and rejoin for ego-driven reasons, spitting spurious fire each time. These guys' dialogue is a highlight for sure. On top of that, the Great Cathedral's paths you explore, optional areas you can reach, and bosses you fight all differ according to your alignment, giving SMT more replay value story-wise than just about any SNES RPG. But the coolest aspect of Shin Megami Tensei is that I never knew what to expect. For most JRPGs, the general structure and vibe are predictable. You'll go from town to town, helping people and learning more about the world and some great evil, then maybe have your party shaken up before putting them back together and collecting some magical artifacts or weapons before finally defeating the ultimate baddie, usually only temporarily on a galactic scale. In other words, your standard hero's journey. SMT totally flips the formula, all taking place in a single region of Japan, yet having you take on all kinds of otherwise mundane locations that feel fresh within a dungeon-crawling JRPG setting, while constantly changing up the status quo. One minute you're exploring well-known locations in Tokyo, the next you're fighting demons and uttering spells like Mazionga from Purgatory, or you're in a dream world speaking to a demon queen. On the way to pacifying that Benedict Arnold chaos hero, at least in my playthrough, Kazuya once again encounters the elusive Yuriko, who reveals herself to be Lilith, the infamous demon betrayer of Adam in Hebrew rabbinical texts. By inference, that makes Kazuya and Yuriko analogues to, or reincarnations of, if you want to take the game's title literally, the biblical Adam and Eve, similar to how Akemi and Yumiko were reincarnations of the Japanese deities Izanagi and Izanami in the first game. Ultimately, the story culminates in Kazuya and Co. either joining God to spread his pious word on the law path, joining Lucifer in chaos to lead the world into an age of freedom, or meeting with Taishang Laojun, the embodiment of the Taoist spirit of balance, who had previously shown up in the guise of an old man to provide occasional wisdom and assistance. He offers to bring a new future to mankind that's reliant on the people themselves. That's the neutral path I chose, and turns out to be the canonical one, which makes sense. JRPGs love taking populist stances, cause, well, they're popular. Who doesn't want humanity to determine its own fate at the end of an RPG? But beyond that, it's telling how the canonical and arguably best ending sees humanity guided by a deity relevant to Japan's culture rather than one from an Abrahamic religion. A natural choice for a game written by Japanese people that becomes a recurring theme in the series. That said, going neutral still leaves you with a cliffhanger ending, where the future of humanity is up in the air as they must brave the ruins of Tokyo. The other endings are potentially even more grim, depending on your perspective. The Law Path sees humanity enter the Millennium Kingdom of God, safe and sound, yet at the expense of their freedom and self-determination, a pessimistic take on the concept it's presumably referencing from the Book of Revelation. On the other side of the demonic coin, a chaos-oriented Kazuya will land himself in a world ruled by demons, where humans are free as can be, yet where strength rules above all, and anyone who's weak gets crushed. Regardless of the ending you opt for, Shin Megami Tensei takes time to examine and then pay off the motivations of all characters involved, and I've even left out a few nifty details to save some surprises for anyone who does want to play this masterpiece. Before I wrap things up though, let's compare SMT against some of the most popular and well-known JRPGs contemporary to when it released. We've got Final Fantasy IV and V, Dragon Quest IV and V, the early Shinin games, The Legend of Heroes 1 and 2, Romancing Saga, and Fire Emblem Gaiden. While I enjoy some of these more than others, I'd say that's a pretty good selection of classics. But how do they compare? Well, none look as good as Shin Megami Tensei, and none provide anywhere close to its level of immersion. For pure linear storytelling, some might look to Dragon Quest V, FF4, or The Legend of Heroes, and that's hard to argue. It's a toss-up for me. But pound for pound, it's tough to top the total package offered by SMT. This is one of my favorite games on the SNES, and among my favorite JRPGs, period. But most importantly, it's fun to play. And pro tip, if you get tired of grinding, fuse some demons instead. You'll save yourself a lot of time. Shin Megami Tensei feels like the first true Atlus RPG, the one that took their fledgling demon summoning concept and meshed it with the kind of creative world building, storytelling, and characterization they're known for today. And well, I think the Atlus of the 90s agreed. The words Megami Tensei translate to reincarnation of the goddess, referring to the protagonists, an idea used again here. But Shin means true or genuine, and this game indeed plays out like Atlus's attempt to make the series their own. Given the untouchable legacy SMT has spawned since, I'd say they succeeded. Thanks for watching. I've been Leon from RPG Haven. Leave a like for that algorithm, subscribe for more videos on RPGs, let me know what you thought of Shin Megami Tensei in the comments, and have a blessed day.